Hello, everyone, and welcome to Classical Revolution here on IDAGIO. My name is Rachel Fenlon, and I am the host of this weekly series, in which I have the pleasure of interviewing guests who really inspire me, who are pushing boundaries in programming, in interpretation, and asking them what drives their creative process and what drives their love for music. Today, I'm really thrilled to be joined by pianist Arnaldo Cohen. Before I give you his sort of formal introduction, I want to tell an anecdote about how I discovered this phenomenal pianist. During the first lockdown of spring, I was enjoying sharing daily records with a friend of mine. And, you know, this sort of record challenge in which you try and find obscure recordings, or you get lost in the golden age of pianists, or both of us particularly interested in pianists. And when we came upon the list recordings of Arnaldo Cohen, both of us kind of, I mean, I won't speak for my friend, but for myself, really stopped in my tracks and viscerally I had a reaction to what I heard. The kind of playing I felt I hadn't heard since this kind of golden age of piano playing. And I hope he's not getting embarrassed now having to listen to this introduction, but I really wanted to say that it became such a joy to discover his playing and diving into the recordings of his that he made, and also a lot of the live recordings on YouTube as well. So it was a huge pleasure and surprise when Arnaldo agreed to come on the show after answering my cold email to his website. And so it's a real thrill for me today. And to give you a more formal perspective of this great artist, his career began as a pianist, winning the first prize of the Busoni competition. And he's performed as a soloist with major orchestras, such as the LA Phil, the Philadelphia Orchestra, Royal Philharmonic, the Houston Grand Symphony, the Bavarian Radio Symphony Orchestra, Cleveland. He has a wide repertoire and has performed solo recitals everywhere from Wigmore Hall to the Concertgebouw and the many major halls in the United States. And is also a prolific recording artist, and many of his recordings you can find here linked to his artist profile on IDAGIO. He is now currently a professor of piano at Indiana University. And yes, I think without much more to say, please welcome Arnaldo Cohen. Hi, Arnaldo.
Hello, very good. Very nice to be here with you.
Thank you for joining us. I'd like to begin the interview by asking what your earliest memories of music were, and whether there were any particular musical moments which stand out to you as being very important for you musically down the line.
I think as my musical background, I would say is the less orthodox as possible, as I was born in Brazil, and my first instrument was a violin, and I had a sister playing piano, and I would go to the piano and just play her music by ear. And then, just to make a long story short, I started piano as well, and my parents did not have any musical education background. Both were immigrants. My father originally from Persia, Israel, Palestine, and my mother from Ukraine. I suppose the Ukraine played a more sort of important role on my DNA eventually. And because my parents wanted us just to, become more cultivated personalities and professionals, although they didn't want me to become a professional musician at all. So, and then my father started buying records, for us to get used to. And one of the first recordings that really made an impact with me was nothing to do with piano. There was one with voice that my mother loved operettas with I would say almost pop tenor called Mario Lanza. Nobody ever, I mean, it's, that still alive can remember, or perhaps was this time. I think, I mean, he died very, very early. We're talking about in the 50s, and I was a kid. Um, and another one was violinist Jascha Heifetz, which made me, it's a great, great impression. I still remember the violin concerto by Korngold, you know, which is now, so who was Korngold? So, and after that, because of the violin, I was not supposed to become a professional musician. I studied piano and violin, but when I was 17, I got into the engineering university school in Brazil, where I studied for 3 years. One more year I'll be an engineer, civil engineer. No, but then I decided to become a professional, and I left my home and I had to work. So I didn't know what to do, and I end up um, applying for a position at the orchestra, the Opera House Orchestra in Rio de Janeiro, and I think they were deaf enough to approve my exam. I played really badly, and I was the last of the Mohicans, in the second violins. But all this to say that for me, music and impression and the emotion that always generated from music always came from either the voice or um, violin. So much so that one of my favorite records for many, many years was uh, the Elisabeth Schwarzkopf playing the Vier letzte Lieder, the last four songs by Strauss. So in particular, the third one, which has a very beautiful violin solo that she repeats afterwards.
Yes.
So basically, I think the best and the most beautiful instruments, I think, on the voice first and the string instrument. And I always say that the great piano playing is the one that doesn't sound like one. So so that's basically the big picture.
Yes, it was going to be one of my questions anyway, was how string playing in particular, because you were a professional violinist, how it contributed to your piano playing. But I think you answered it.
Yes, and the violin has one particular, I mean, characteristic when you play as a performer. When you play, the sound is almost in your ear. It's like you're having a headphone, inside of the instrument. So, the to hear the music so close to the instrument, I think is a completely different experience than a piano. But more than that is to listen to the music from inside, which is the singing.
Which is the singing, yeah.
Exactly. So you go out, and you end up in the piano.
Wow, I never thought about that before.
It's like your voice. I mean, when we listen out to our voice in a loudspeaker or in a recording, say, my voice is different. Of course, it's totally different from what you listen to. I mean, you listen to yourself in a completely different way. I think music, I mean, the singer, you are very lucky. I know you're a singer. So you're very lucky because you get in touch directly with the source of the origin of the whole thing, where everything is born. The creativity, the sound, the expression, everything.
So then my question would be, why continue to pursue the piano? What drove that? What was that driving force?
Look, when I was in the engineering university, school, the most important subject for me was statistics. And I understood somehow that everything we do is to do with probabilities. We are here because of the probability of you talking to your friend about this and listening by chance to my list, and also the probability for you to like it or hate my recording. So I was in Brazil studying engineering. Piano and violin were just. I was doing three majors in the same school. And a friend of mine called me saying that someone heard me in a kind of a recital, students' recital. And there was a pianist called Jacques Klein, who was a very, very good pianist, Brazilian pianist, won the first prize in Geneva competition. He was a fabulous pianist, fabulous artist. He died very young at say 52, in the around 81, 82. And this friends, kind of invited me to play for him. I didn't want to, and after a long story, I finally went. I played for him, and he said afterwards, he said, "Look, I want to talk to you." Uh, and he said, "You don't know anything about music. You don't have any technique. You know." And I was really a bit sort of astonished. I said, "Look, I know that. I mean, this is not new. I came here to learn something I didn't know. So that was the reason why I didn't want to come to you. It's like, because I know that. So what's new? Is that your great lesson to me? The conclusion of the whole thing?" He said, come down, boy. Big Brazilian and son of a Persian, you see. Now I'm much more civilized, I must say. So he said, "I wanted to tell you that in spite of all this, I think you have everything, all ingredients to become a first class musician, a very good pianist." I didn't know what a very good pianist was. I knew, but I didn't have the self-assessment, what I needed, what was wrong, and I just thought at that time, and because one of the influences of my youth were the films, very romantic films with piano playing, like with there is one famous Elizabeth Taylor, Vittorio Gassman playing violin, Mendelssohn violin concerto, all those. And I remember people talking about the Elizabeth, no, the Helena Rubinstein circuit. That's not from your. That means Helena Rubinstein circuit. Helena Rubinstein was a kind of a makeup company that this Helena Rubinstein, London, Paris, New York, and that came to my mind. That means international. And I asked him, "You mean international?" That for me would perhaps would be the symbol of quality. If I go around the world, is because I must be good. And I said, with one word, international. And he said, "Yes. Would you teach me?" He said, "Yes." So 2 weeks later, I gave up the engineering. 3 months later, I started playing violin in the orchestra and practicing like mad, like jumped into the piano for almost 4 or 5 years. And I was lucky enough to get first prize in the Busoni competition. But I was not prepared to win. And this is a very interesting point for many students. They want to go to competitions, but they're not prepared to win. I was not mature enough. I didn't have repertoire. So I didn't know anything about career. I did things that you have no idea. The crazy things I've done. I said no to Deutsche Grammophon.
And that was because of repertoire or because of?
No, I didn't feel prepared.
Okay.
I said, "Look, to have my name in a cover of a, the yellow
Yes.
label, I mean, beautifully, displayed, and it's not, man. I don't think I have the quality yet to record. And the guy left, and there was a producer who liked me very much. He was in the Puzzoni competition. So it's a long story, but,
Yeah.
and what today, when I see back, I said, I mean, I was so wild, I didn't know what I was doing. I should have stopped. I should have gone to, and I wanted to go to Moscow
Uh-huh.
to study and to spend some 3-4 years there and then start a career. But then I was afraid that would be, I could not retake or what from where I was. And that was the golden key for me
Yeah.
with the, I always wanted just one thing, which was to survive and earn my living with dignity with music. The stage itself, the career itself, never really played so much importance in my life. I think it was important, of course, but if you the other side, the back, I think the backstage of this career is not as glamorous as many people think it is. And but I'm very grateful to life because here I am talking about music.
Exactly. Exactly. No, it's so interesting. I mean, it's an interesting topic to talk about, the career and the talent being, not even the talent, but I mean, the gift and the career being very, very different things, essentially. So I think, well, it's good that you're a teacher because I'm sure you could impart lots of wisdom to the
I learn
younger
a lot.
generation.
I learn a lot with them, I must say,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
because time as well, everything is so different from my time in many senses, in terms of career, in terms of aesthetics, in terms of interpretation. You know, but it's very interesting, I think,
yeah.
and I try just to follow what's going on in the world. So you are always living in your time, even carrying the bag with you know ideas and souvenirs and emotional history and recordings in your hard drive of important things and emotional things, and live the best you can. um, I think expressing yourself in this beautiful language.
Hmm. I'm so curious to hear some of your thoughts on being an interpreter. I want to read a quote that I read of yours from a magazine called Van Classical, which actually I'm from Vancouver Island, so I actually know
Oh,
this magazine.
oh, I see.
Um, and so, but there was an interesting quote, and I wanted to ask you about it. So in interpretation, you've said that being a faithful interpreter means being in touch with the composer's full emotional message and what's being written between the lines. And I think that's exactly, as an interpreter myself, I can completely relate with that. And I'm just curious to hear you talk a little bit about that and what your path is to finding what's written between the lines.
Hmm. Well, well, I think I will have just to try to organize a little bit the idea, the thoughts, by starting by saying what music represents to me. I think music is a language which was invented or created um, for one particular reason, that you could say things in that language that you could not say in other languages. So and I think the reason for that was to perhaps to help people say or say things that probably we could not say in general. is, and I think the reason for that to be created, I think, was somehow to do with oppression and or repression. So music is a fantastic language. It's such a clever language because you can say anything you want, and it has a kind of a code which you cannot break. And on the other side, I mean, the listener listen to that sound, that language, he incorporates that language and melt that with his moment, his emotions, his history, emotional history, and he understands what he wants, which is completely different from probably what I said. So I always say that if you have 1,000 people in the hall, the concert hall, you have 1,001 interpretations. So uh, having said that, another uh, concept I think is very important when you listen, or at least I mean the music as we know, even in the contemporary music, I would say, because I think there's so many interesting ideas of expression through different, even it's a language, but sing from a different angle. Um, I think mankind is very much in the center of everything. Man, we invented the music, we play music, we listen to music, and even criticize the music. So we are from A to Z, we are there. So I believe that mankind is the same, basically, within the last 400, 500 years. I don't think there was any biological change in mankind. So 500 years in the history is nothing. So we are the same. So all emotions are the same. But what changes, of course, is the expression of that same emotion. I think Mozart, eventually in the second movement of a Mozart concerto or in a beautiful aria, he can show a desperate uh, kind of feeling with just, raising one eyebrow as well is the same. I think his this desperation is not less than Liszt when he writes Desperate, and everybody just break the piano and do a big production. I think the feeling is the same. So for me, it's very important to understand that the expression is different, but about basically the same feelings. I mean, I always been very much interested in psychology and psychoanalysis. And I think you have some, like in music, you have some 4 or 5 themes with variations, with that cause all are responsible for all kinds of emotions, positive or negatives we have. So, like fashion, which is an artist, the same is also an art, and you dress yourself, you show yourself somehow. Um, but fashion, like like interpretation, change with time. I always tell my students, can you imagine? I mean, if the girls, the Korean girls, and in a American college, they come during the summer for lessons, with the little shorts, I said, can you imagine knocking Liszt's door, asking for a lesson in shorts and how they dress nowadays? Or can you imagine me arriving, with my hat and my tails, at the school? And say, look, we are the same people. Expressions are different. So for me, it's very important that, as I said before, you have to live in our time. So people from our time understand the concepts of our time. So it's very important that in this kind of walkie-talkie between you and the public, you have to think a lot how you're going to make them understand, but within some kind of a, I don't like the word establishment because I'm very much sometimes against establishment, um, but again, if I would come on the stage, in shorts, I mean, I don't think it would be appropriate. I mean, I could be just shock everybody, but what's the point of shocking everybody? I mean, I'm there just to, so I, I dress, according to the rules because my dressing is not the most important thing. For some people, they want to express as well their clothes. That's fine. I mean, nothing against. I mean, I'm a democratic, very democratic. And so see, when I read music, you have to have basic ideas about lots of um, items, I would say, lots of points that are part of what you can call a beautiful playing. What is a beautiful playing? A beautiful playing, well, if you go to a concert, anybody who is going to a concert, um, you ask, did you enjoy the concert? Oh yes. If you're amateur, if you're a music lover, say, why? Because I felt my heart, this is what I feel, I like it, and that's it. Like if you're an amateur, if you're a pianist amateur, you can play with your elbow, but if you like it, I mean, fine. That's the goal, to enjoy. Play with your elbow more. The more you like, fine. Break the piano with happiness, no problem. But you have, when you play with for other people, you have to be a little bit more careful. So if you ask a professional or a student, and this is what I try very much, and this is my philosophy of it's a kind of a very pompous name, but I would say concept eventually, that when you listen to someone playing and you say, uh, how did you like that? And the answer has to be, oh, I like his performance. Why? And then comes the knowledge, oh, because his sound is so beautiful. Why his sound is so beautiful? Because he's magic. No, because he uses the pedal in such a fantastic and sophisticated way. Uh, the balance between the hands, absolutely fantastic. The phrasing, you know, is fantastic. But when you talk about music, it's like you talk about music. So you talk about music, you have direction in where you go. So, and then you have the pulse. What is pulse? I always say there's a difference between pulse and rhythm. Rhythm for me is the mechanical rhythm that I call that, the metronome. I'm, I think, I mean, if you sing and try to make chamber music with a metronome, you're going to see, and put your metronome together with your heart, you're going to see your heart is wrong. So if you sing any melody, Chopin nocturne or any melody, and if you accompany the metronome, you're going to say it sounds wrong. It sounds wrong. So what is the kind of pulse that if you are listening to, you can swear by anything that the person is playing in tempo. This is the right pulse. That you are in tempo, but you are not mechanically in tempo. I think pulse for me is one of the most important elements of music. So and I could go on and on and on in many. I'm not here just to give lessons on how. I'm sure many people know this, but when you see a piece of music, you see, okay, harmonic progressions. How should I play that note? Is a melodic note part of the melody, or so how I'm going to divide? When you see all that, it's like your eyes have to be like a scanner
Mm.
and try to understand what is there. Then, of course, so you say, what is the pulse? Is this music? Well, the phrase goes until where? I'm going to see. Rachmaninoff used to say something very interesting that every phrase has a climax or one or two climax, but is the climb where you have to go. So when you write, when you see written forte, you say, oh, okay, that's the forte. But when you see forte and then you see two fortes, then you have fortissimo, then you have three fortes, and then you have three fortes with big accents, with sforzato. What is forte? Forte is mezzo forte.
Right.
So it's much less because you have so and all that.
Context, yeah.
Everything is to do so, and
Yeah.
then you have the style. How are you
Mhm.
going? Are you going to show your emotions, by raising an eyebrow, or are you going to shout? I mean, how are you going to deal with silence? I think I give lessons, for instance, always with a baton.
Uh-huh.
And it's not because I'm a frustrated conductor, which I'm not. So it's because the conducting is absolutely a great example, and for all musicians, because the first thing you have to do is to know what you're going to do, and for you, if you know what to do, you have to do like a conductor. You have to anticipate. Anticipation is everything in conducting, and I think in anything, because you
Mm.
have before you do that, you have already the sound, and when you go to the sound here, there is nothing you can do. The impact, the strength, the force, uh, the acceleration, the tempo, the expression, the touch, the color of the sound, everything has to be in your mind for you to produce. I always say that the great technique in piano playing, great technique is is what happens when you don't play. It's between the notes. Because depending on your movements, the sound is a result.
Mm.
And this is not my school. This is
Yeah.
this is obvious. So, and I could go on and on and on and say, well, what does it mean for me? Is that chord, this major chord that goes to diminished? How is the bass? How does it go? I think to have a notion of composition and counterpoint, I think it's also very important for you to understand where the intensity, the dramaticity, the releases, and the direction. If and you're going to get all this music and pass on to your personality, and it will come out, with a stamp which is totally personal. And this is what I think. I mean, everybody, any musician should go for, opposed to many, students who, very understandably, many times, they are so worried about the technical part of it that, playing the notes, it's very hard to change, because they think, again, if you think about a wrong note in our society, a wrong note, a mistake, is read as a moral mistake. So there are so many different concepts, from to face an audience. There are so many paradoxes when you play
Mm.
piano. So many paradoxes when you play for other people. What a strange profession, isn't it? Just go on stage and do a kind of a emotional striptease, isn't it? sometimes, it bothered me a lot in the past. I said, my God, what am I showing myself? I mean, how? So, and also I learned that it's very interesting that the great paradox when you're on a stage is that the more you distance yourself from the public, I think the more you are able to give to them. Because you're expressing yourself and
Without
you
thinking about them.
about what they're going to think. Are they
Yeah,
liking it? I'm not. I don't want to.
yeah.
We don't want to impress anybody on purpose.
Mm,
I don't want them to like because I am making them like on purpose. They come there.
mm,
They come there and they pay not to see me suffering in the piano.
mm.
They come there to get the result of my whatever I feel, get that product, and they pass through them. That's for them, we are not important.
No.
Our the product everything we produce, this is the material they come for, and that's what they buy. They buy it for themselves, not for us.
Mm.
We are not important in a certain way. We are kind of the bridge, which I think that's one of the most important thing in the music. I think music, the most important function of the music is perhaps it works as a bridge between you and yourself.
Hmm. Wow.
It helps you to get in touch with yourself. So if you
And
see
also
young, sorry,
distance yourself, and also
e-
distance yourself from yourself.
exactly.
Yeah.
So if you see, for instance, the young generation that goes to a nightclub, this very loud music with a percussion, this is almost also a way for them to get to forget about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Is almost that noise will help them to forget many things they don't want to face. So it's, for me, and music is, everything is to do with mankind.
Mm.
And
Well, no, sorry, please.
no, that's it. Yeah.
No, I mean, I just, speaking about this exchange between yourself as the interpreter and the audience, does it ever bother you, or does this ever weigh in that the listeners of today aren't the listeners that were 50 years ago or 70 years ago, because our musical language has expanded so much, and also our musical education has changed so much. And yet, does that ever, bother you that you've put so much into an interpretation, that into this language that you said is code, that people need to understand? And yeah, I'm just curious to hear your thoughts about that.
I think the world changed, and I think we're living, so many things happen, in the last 30, 40 years. Technology basically is responsible for that. One would imagine that, with the easy access to everybody to music. I mean, when I was young, to buy, a LP or a record from Deutsche Grammophon, you could not buy more than because they were expensive. I didn't have money as a student. So nowadays, you just press one button, you have all records that been, published. So I would say that, that for me, theoretically, that should be the responsible for concert halls be packed,
Uh-huh.
and you should have several symphonies in your town, because the demand will be so high. And what happens is exactly the opposite. That is because there are many, I'm sure there are people who can explain that much better than I do. But the way I see it in terms of being in contact with the public, I think the public in nowadays, you have very sophisticated public still, but it's getting less and less and less sophisticated, because this is a language that you have to get closer, you have to be intimate with the language for you to understand it. It's not like my English, for instance. That I must say, I never
That's
studied
not
English in my
true.
life. I hope you understand what I say. Anyway,
Oh, God, goodness.
but it's like sometimes I feel like playing I don't know, a Prokofiev sonata for the general public. Uh, Sometimes it's trying to teach Chinese to a 30-year-old man, which is very difficult. The important thing, I think, that's where education for me becomes absolutely an essential tool for you, because, and it's not a coincidence that pop music, so-called pop, because you don't have to study, you don't have to, it's natural, the tonality, uh, the easy C major, G major, C major, C, we still, and sometimes I listen to hits that are making, great success, millions of, I don't know, records, viewers, or Facebook or whatever. And then if you analyze it, harmonically, I think it's, I would say in 1400. I mean, that's what they used to do that, and perhaps a little bit more sophisticated.
Yeah.
So, and that, of course, you have politics involved with that, because culture needs for to be developed. I mean, needs education and needs study, needs. Uh, I'd like, this is a conversation that we could, talk for 5 hours, but I'd like just to make one point about that, about my function as a teacher. I lived in London for many years, and I taught not very much. I had 4 or 5 students at the Royal Academy, uh, and some 15 years ago, I was touring in America, and many things happened, and I was invited to come, and I was convinced, and I decided to come and live in America and become a professor, teacher at the Indiana University, which is an incredible university. Um, because for me, I was one of the reasons why I came here is because I started seeing the world in a different way. I mean, to be a concert pianist in an era where you have diversions in terms of um, for especially for the young people, you have so many attractive fields for everybody. That how many young people really, they listen to classical music, or they read, or they are in the culture. So then you have the politicians. Culture does not bring too many votes, because most part, how many people in the, I never seen any statistics about it. How many people in Germany, perhaps is more than in other countries, or in England, in France, in Spain, or in Africa, they heard or they appreciate anything classical. I mean, they heard about that language. I mean, you depend on, so how can you talk to people and understand the language? They don't, it's like Chinese. Oh, it can be, nice, but I don't really understand. Going back, so when I came here, before I thought be a teacher in a school of music, if you could not make the students great players and great performers, I think there was a waste of time and waste of money. And I must confess, I have changed 100% my idea and my direction, because when I teach music nowadays, I can see the word it goes. I think the only fact that a student, even if he's going to be, a manager, he's going to be the head of the admissions in a school of music, he's going to be a teacher for community college or children or a college or private studio. This guy or this man or this woman will be a better citizen. Let's know before explaining and getting. I go directly, and I think people understand what I mean by being more sensitive, by being more cultivated, by understanding, getting in touch with emotions, to get in touch with sophistication. That means quality needs detail. If you don't have detail, and even history, you learn so much, and you become, and it's not very difficult. It's just to study a little bit of history that you can see the influence of culture and the development of any civilization from all points of view. And I think we need desperately that in our society. So that is basically my mission.
That's wonderful. It's like, it's wonderful because it's so broad. It's not just focusing on one role of what music can serve, but it's looking at such a broad scope of what being a musician is, or training to be a musician is.
It's much more it's much more than playing well.
Exactly.
Chopin Opus 25, number 6, the double thirds.
Yeah. And I love this idea, or not, what you say about it creating better citizens and responsible citizens, and I think that's very inspiring. I want to ask you a little bit about recording, because when I watched a couple of interviews, I noticed that you were quite dubious about the recording industry, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that, and perhaps also that contributes to what we were just talking about, the sort of the rise of the recording industry and of technology. But for example, you speak about how the recording industry, you feel, has damaged kind of the truthfulness of expression, in its ability to fake things, or to and I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting subject. Having said, I'll do the preface to about that, is that from the emotional point of view, I forget about what I think about a recording, but like Glenn Gould had about public concerts. He had a whole theory that public concertizer would be finished, everything would be recording, the future of music would be, technology, and that wasn't. Of course, one of the reasons, I know lots of people who knew Glenn, and many stories, and the truth of the fact, or one big part of this concept or this idea, his idea, was that he was so afraid of playing in public. So it's kind of a very convenient concept for that. I would not say that was my concept in a way, although because of my insecurity, especially at the beginning of my career, I think I was not a good pianist at all. So I didn't want to be recorded, because the recording for me meant the lack of quality or a bad thing about myself. So this is what's before, having these ideas I mean, if you go through psychoanalysis, the idea that you play perfect, doesn't mean you're a good person. Once I asked Norman Lebrecht, I worked for some years as well as a sort of a writing interviews, and Norman Lebrecht from the Daily Telegraph. I asked him once, you know, uh, I said, Norman, do you think a fantastic artist is necessarily a good person? And he said, of course not. And I said, why not? And he gave a very interesting answer. He said, well, the music is like water. The same music, the same water that can save your life can drown you, can kill you. So I'm talking about the 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 emotional aspect of recording. For me, it was very difficult. Then, of course, I don't know, and I confess, I don't know if because of that I developed a reason for me just to exactly to explain why I should not record. I don't know but I think the fact that I am aware of that, I think has some truth.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, I'll be hiding behind that. So I have to confess, and then I have to explain. Um, my experience with recordings, first of all, is I didn't know how was the recording. So you're there for 3, 4 days, 5, 6, 7 hours a day. For 3 days, we're talking about 18 hours, 20 hours, just to make a recording of 60, 70 minutes. And the first thing is, why the hell I need 20 hours to play 70? Because of that. So, and then the first edit or from first recording I heard and I said, this is not me. I don't accept this is not going to be out. I said, how did you come to that? For people to understand, I always give the same example. It's like you say, I love you 3 times in 3 different days. You say, I love you, I love you, I love you, but in the same context. Then comes the guy, get the I from the first day, love for the second, you the third day, and they put I love you, which you say, well, you said it, but I did not say it with that kind of expression. That is not me. So the editing for me is something which kills the spontaneity and the truth of what you're saying. So that to start with, just to give you a sort of a very rough and funny example. At the same time, going further, if you see someone, and I tell you, Paulini, great pianist, I greatly admire the intellect of this guy. Is phenomenal. Paulini, in one of his recordings, I mean, I knew the producer, the Ton Meister, and had something like 600, 700 edits. 600. I know that Kissin, I think one of his debut recital, the recording, he went back to the concert hall and retouched 350 edits. And you have people, great musicians with some. My point is very simple. Now, without names, and this, please, this is not a disrespect towards Paulini or to Kissin, people who I greatly admire. They are, for me, great giants. Is the idea that when you listen to something, to a recording, and they need 600 edits to put that you listen, and then they go and play that program on live, and they have one chance to do that. It's obvious to me that they, in one take, they cannot imitate or they can reproduce what is in the record. So, what is the truth? I think the record, if you cannot reproduce live the record, why do you base yourself on the record to go to a concert? Because what you're going to listen has nothing to do with that. So you can say the recording, the the concept is a different concept. You know, recording is something. Recording is the ultimate, you know, achievement that we could not reach. This is the nirvana in terms of musical goal. But unfortunately, I can't do that. Like, so you have to be happy with my, you know, my mistakes or my imperfection. And then the technology comes that, you know, again, from the human point of view, with the negation and the not conformity of mankind with with our own finitude. You have to be, and that's the reason why all Olympic Games you have world records won more and more, because you have to prove that you can be more, you can. So, you know, I just heard that one of the great soccer players in the world, Maradona, just have died now, 2 hours ago. So I'm sorry to give this notice here in Europe, but in Argentina. So people who are legends, you know, they die. When you think about Brahms, he died. Everybody died. I think there are much more important people dead than life, I think.
Yes, I would agree.
Would you agree? So, so, so I always say that, you know, the cemetery is the place where all indispensable people go. So, or end. So
and ideas die too, right?
So, and going back to the recording, when you buy a record and it says live recording, of course, all recordings have to be live. There's no such a thing as dead recording. Of course, it's a live recording, but, and once I had, you know, a discussion, a conversation, interesting conversation with someone from the Gramophone magazine. I said, so why don't you give an idea to all companies instead of putting live recording? Like, for instance, Kishin, he was in front of an audience, but then he next day he go there without an audience. So can you call it live? Why don't you use, why the market does not use another word like unedited performance? So then I'll be really interested, because then is the real thing. So it's you know, this is one thing, and finally, I think the recordings are not good in general because of this aspect and the result and the consequences of this aspect of the editing. Because, and then I go back to the students, what I mentioned before about the technical, because they listen to recordings and they try to imitate the records. The recording should be a sound photograph of a moment. And what happens is that, you know, for the young people, you know, I have students, incredible fingers, you know, but what do you want to say? But for them, it is like an athletes. They are much more athletes than creators or musicians or speaking or talking, you know, in a different language. They are just talking like, you know, they pronounce, they're spelling the names of a story, you know. So that is, I think, I mean, the records now, I must say that the technology was or is becoming the vaccine against itself. Because now you have less edited recordings because there are no more recording companies, and everything to do with live recordings, the YouTube, with camera, with so there, the lies, that means lies that I can do what is there but I can't do here. I mean, they are dissipating. So I think the record industry was a victim of itself. Well, I think it was a suicidal actually process.
Okay. I never thought of it like that. But
In the industry, it's an
the industry of it. Of course, the only counter to that, in my opinion, would be the sort of educational value of a recording, and that, like, for me, what the recording offers me now is that it gives you a context of music today and what was all the different styles and fashions. And
exactly. So
I mean, it's an education.
Yeah, but I must say something.
Yeah.
In terms of the integrity of recordings that have been done during the last 50, 100 years. I'm not saying that everything is a lie. I'm not saying. The fact is that for you to have an integrity in the recording, I think the artist has to participate on that process of the editing. For instance, I remember I recorded the Dante Sonata many years ago, in the 90s. So in the last 2 pages, you have jumps and it was late, 10 o'clock in the evening, and I could not get the whole page. I wanted the whole passage. I think, if I'm a pianist, I have to be able to play the whole passage. And they tried, and my producer said, "Oh, no, come on! You already have it. I said, "What do you mean by you have?" "No, because you had a problem here, but I can do it. But you had the same pulse. I can edit easily, no problem." I said, "No." And then I said, "Would you do me a favor? We're in England." I said, "Go, with the technician, piano, and go to a pub there for half an hour. Press the button and leave me alone here recording." Okay. So when I came back, I said, "You have 2 takes, perfect."
Wow.
Because for me, it was a question of my pride for myself that I have to. So, and this is sometimes is impossible because there is no perfection. There's no perfect. You have to practice so hard. You have to do. The work is so hard and difficult, physical, to achieve this kind of perception that many people today, when you see someone like Yuja Wang, it's unbelievable what this girl, I greatly admire her, it's impossible, it's incredible what she can do. So I'm sure if Liszt, if Yuja Wang would have lived in this time, look, Liszt would have a competitor. So how did Liszt play? How did Chopin play? If Chopin would go to the Chopin competition in Warsaw, would he pass to the second round? And then he would go to the jury, and say, "Can you tell me why I did not pass playing my own things?" Or if perhaps he would be incorporated, in the body of a young Korean boy. Why didn't that pass? And the jury would say, "You do not understand anything about Chopin." And then we go back to what we said before. about fashion, style, and lots of things. So
Yeah.
the whole thing is fascinating.
Yeah.
And but we have to see everything with from far. I think we are all in the top of a mountain, but sometimes we're looking to opposite directions, but we're still on the top of the same mountain.
Beautiful. Well, Arnaldo, thank you. I mean, I think we're probably over time, yes, certainly. And but thank you so much for these thoughts and this very inspiring conversation.
Thank you. I apologize for talking too much. No,
oh my goodness, no, please.
That's my professional deformation because I'm teaching now.
Oh, it was really, really, really enjoyable. Thank you.
It was a great pleasure talking to you.
And for everyone who tuned in today, please check out Arnaldo's playlist that is accompanying the episode, which I really enjoyed listening to all day. And it has lots of this golden age pianism and some Schwarzkopf and some Mahler and Schönberg. And yeah, it was. So please definitely check it out. And Arnaldo, thank you so much for making time. And just that you have two members of what we call the unofficial Arnaldo Cohen fan club.
Oh yeah, thank you so
hopefully
much.
Hopefully one day we meet in person would be very nice.
With great pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Okay, take care of yourself. Be careful. Be healthy.
Yes.
And all the best and good luck for your life, for your shows and for your career, for anything you are into, because we need people like you. We need people like you that just spread the word of music in a way. Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
All the best, and thanks for your attention. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.